Hello, this is Pastor Brian Wolfmueller of Table Talk Radio. Hey, pay attention, because you're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I am your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 378. Thank you all so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. Welcome back for those of you who are returning listeners. Welcome aboard for those of you who are visiting with us for the first time. I hope you enjoy what you hear today, and I hope that you will come back, go peruse the back catalog, all the great content that we have for you, and stick around, because more fun to come. Today, I am on my own. It's been a crazy week, and I am going to be working on kind of going through a little something that crossed my news feed this week. I wanted to go over and discuss with you today. But first, I want to give a big thank you and a big shout out to the members of the Reformation Gun Club, the men and women who make this show possible. This show is not sponsored. We don't have any advertising. We rely on our members, the members of the Reformation Gun Club, to help keep the lights on and pay the bills and all that good stuff. And I want to give a special shout out to a handful of members today, including the disreputable Bartlett, Tony from Little Elm, Texas, Mike from Decatur, Alabama, John from Spokane, Washington, Robert from Massaquoi, Illinois, Peter from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, Derek from Huntsville, Alabama, Robert from Monroe, Georgia, John Nielsen, and John from Wheaton, Illinois as well, and our newest member, welcome aboard to Keith from Palmyra, Missouri. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you to all of the members of the Reformation Gun Club for your support over the years. We really do appreciate it. Folks, if you would like to become a member and find out what the benefits of membership are, like access to exclusive content, hundreds of hours of exclusive content, including extended versions of episodes like today's episode, I'll get to that in a minute, plus content that we create specifically for Gun Club members, some cool Armed Lutheran swag, invitations to our monthly online hangouts. Last week, episode 377 was our September hangout. October is coming in a few weeks. If you would like to join and be a part of that and come hang out with members of the club and with members of the cast, visit reformationgunclub.com. Membership starts as little as $15, $17 per year. You can probably dig the change out of the cushions in your car seat and your couch. $1.26 a month, I think, is what it comes out to. Check it out today, reformationgunclub.com. Come join us, and we hope to see you at a future online hangout. And you'll get to hear the second half of today's show. Again, more about that in a moment. Today, as I said, I want to talk about something that crossed my news feed in the past week. It's not the Ukraine war. It's not the fact that Joe Biden is now building President Trump's border wall. It's not the stupid shenanigans by Matt Gaetz to throw a wrench in the monkey works and basically step on a rake while the Biden administration continues to flounder. It's not even Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. No, it's an article from The Hill entitled, "Ethan's Law Saves Lives. We Need Gun Safety Measures at the Federal Level." Now, I suspect that I know what probably most of you will be thinking about this issue, the idea of gun safety laws at the federal level, things like safe gun storage. But if you listen to this show for any amount of time, you probably will not be surprised by my take in today's episode. Ethan's Law is a bill that has been submitted by Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut to mandate safe gun storage. I want to go through the article and then go through the bill and some of the claims that are made and share my thoughts. I will be going through the bill in the second half of the show. That commentary, that content will be exclusive for Gun Club members only. So again, if you would like to hear all of the exclusive content that is available, visit reformationgunclub.com or armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes, and you can sign up today. The article that I'm going to be reviewing here is written by a woman named Kristen Miller Song. She is the mother of the Ethan for whom the law is named. Ethan, unfortunately, tragically died in 2018 at a neighbor's house after someone gained access to a firearm that was unsecured. And she begins her article by sort of retelling the tale. You hear an ambulance flash by the house, siren wailing, and you give it little thought. It has nothing to do with you until it does. Suddenly, I saw my teenage son on a stretcher coming from a neighbor's house where a handgun with live ammunition was casually stored in, of all things, a shoebox. The ER doctor, who could not look me in the eye, suggested that I not view the body, but rather remember Ethan as he was. I ignored him. I had to see. But Ethan was gone. All was quiet, but for the sound of my heart beating, my heart breaking. Now this should be heartbreaking for anyone, especially parents. I cannot imagine this woman's grief. I can't even begin to even assume to understand what she feels and what she's been through. The idea of losing a child, you're supposed to outlive your children, but losing a child is probably the worst thing any person can go through, I think. And if you have listened to the show long enough, you know I have long advocated for the civil liability of gun owners who allow their firearms to fall into the wrong hands and to be used in situations like this. So the author continues, this awful day in 2018 set in motion a chain of events that included the passage of Ethan's Law, which mandates safety rules for storing a weapon in a home where minors are present. It passed in our state of Connecticut a few years ago by a near unanimous vote. It even won the support of many Second Amendment advocates. And that's the point. Neither the state nor federal version of Ethan's Law should be called gun control. It is life-saving legislation for our children, period. Now, I know that many would disagree with that assessment. I do not. Safe storage, the discussion of safe storage and safe storage laws, whatever, should not be gun control. But Democrats don't like guns, period. And any opportunity to restrict civilian ownership is an opportunity that they're going to take. But I'll get to that in a moment. I think if you go back and listen to our episodes on, say, red flag laws, my take on this is very similar. I think Ethan's Law is a good idea in principle, as are many such laws. But the devil is in the details. And the solution to problems like irresponsible gun ownership is not as simple as just passing a law. And we'll get to the details of the law later in the show. But back to the article first. Quote, our caring society mandates and regulates car seats, smoke detectors, and seat belts because neglecting such simple, common sense, low-cost measures was costing the lives of children. The same motivation drives our efforts to make Ethan's Law, which is H.R. 660, there is a Senate version, Senate Bill 173, into federal law. Now, here's where we get into problems with safe storage laws and any kind of discussion of guns. When you start making comparisons to things like cars, comparisons to car seats, comparisons to smoke detectors, to seat belts, the first problem, of course, is enforcement with seat belts and car seats. Those laws are deterrents to bad behavior because police can cite you for violations if they see you violating the law when you're out and about in public driving your car. A police officer maybe stops you for speeding and sees that you're not wearing your seatbelt or your child is unsecured. And then they can see you're violating the law, right? But in the case of safe storage at home, no one's going to be able to see you violating that law. The question is, who is going to be able to cite you for those violations? This is where we get into the details, and this is where you get into problems. Unless you have reason to have police in your home, they're not going to know if you've got a loaded AR-15 just standing by the nightstand. And to be fair, these laws, these mandates on smoke detectors and seatbelts and the like were not mandated because children were dying. They were really to protect insurance companies so they don't have to pay out claims for people who are injured or die because of these negligent behaviors. It wasn't to protect children. Let's get that clear. The danger is growing, the author says. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that guns became the leading cause of death among children in 2020, killing more people aged 1 to 19 in the U.S. than vehicle crashes, drug overdoses, or cancer. Now, here's where we get another problem. And I don't mean to be harsh with this woman. I'm not trying to be critical of this. I understand this woman's motivations. I sympathize with her motivations. My criticism is with the way this is being presented. And this is a common occurrence that we see whenever we talk about guns. It's the misuse of statistics. Lies, and damn statistics, or whatever the quote is. It's the misleading use of statistics that is the problem. When you start counting people aged 19 as a child, you're stupid. I'm sorry. Nobody on this planet considers a 19-year-old a child. If a person is legally old enough to fight in the military, to get married, to buy booze or cigarettes, they're not children. But when you widen the definition for guns, you get bigger numbers, and therefore you get an emotional argument. And I think we could have done without that sentence in her article, because this is misleading statistics that will immediately turn people off if they have any understanding of this issue. I honestly have never understood the ways that the different ways that we consider people old enough to do things. We consider 18 for the military, 16 to drive a car, 21 to buy cigarettes or booze, 16 to get married, 18 to vote, 16 to get a job, 18 to buy a rifle, 21 for handguns. What the hell, people? Could we just not have one simple, consistent metric for what adulting is? But regardless of that silliness, nobody in their right mind considers an 18 or 19-year-old to be a child. Many would not even consider 16 and 17-year-olds to be adults. And in many cases, if a 16 or a 17-year-old, even a 15-year-old, commits a violent crime, they're tried as adults. So, to really see what's going on with child mortality and firearms, you need to look at ages 15 and under, not 1 through 19. Otherwise, you're lumping in young adult criminals and gangbangers. And she does admit that that's an issue here later in the article. But back to the article for a moment. The Journal of Injury epidemiology estimates there are 430 unintentional firearm fatalities in the U.S. per year. The CDC puts that tally in 2020 at 476. That's an average of more than one per day. The rate is highest for teens and young adults. Ethan was 15. The National Institutes of Health notes that teens in that group often are shot in the homes of friends. Now, my thoughts on that. The 476 unintended firearm fatalities per year, consider that that's in a nation of 335 million. That's 0.14 per 100,000 people. That is insanely low. Now, to quote my good friend Derek LeBlanc from Kids Safe Foundation, even one is too many. But that's staggeringly low. How many, though? Notice that's just 476 total. How many of those are actually children? The interesting fact is that the article does not make that clear. And to be honest, I had an absolutely horrible time trying to find statistics on this. The CDC website is god-awful, and my Googling skills failed me. So if you want to pipe up in the comments and provide some context there, some exact numbers, that would be great. But I can guarantee you that all 476 are not children. Certainly not, unless, of course, maybe you consider 18, 19-year-olds children, then the numbers, who knows? But anyway, so how do you justify a federal law here, right? We're using tiny numbers here to justify proposing federal legislation. Compare that number, the 476, to deaths due to car accidents or house fires, the reason that we mandated car seats, seatbelts, and smoke detectors. Those numbers were insanely high, and that moved people to action. Now we're talking about 0.14 per 100,000. We're talking about an infinitesimally small number. And we're using that tiny number to justify federal legislation. And I think that's a bad idea. Federal law to solve a tiny problem is not a good idea. The federal government is terrible at solving big problems, much less tiny ones. I know it's not tiny for the victims. I know it's not tiny for the author and her family and for the families of the victims, but the numbers don't justify federal law, the numbers by themselves. So how do you justify federal law? Well, in the case of the author and in many other cases, you inflate the numbers by conflating homicide with firearms, with accidents, and then you include children ages 16 and up. 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old quote-unquote children. Now remember, keep in mind, I sympathize with the author. I'm supportive of efforts to improve gun storage and gun safety. So when we're talking about this, though, I want you to give me an argument that doesn't twist statistics and the facts to make the case. And that's something that she's fallen into here. I'm not suggesting that she's doing this out of anything political, because she states her political viewpoints. But this is a common trap that people fall into. Back to the author, and she will correctly point out some of the problems with these statistics. Quote, then there are the more complicated and nuanced questions of adolescent mass shooters, of gang violence, and teen suicides. And that is absolutely right. So the question we have to ask when we're proposing legislation is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because we can't solve all three. Are we trying to solve mass shootings? Are we trying to solve teen suicide? Are we trying to stop gang violence? Are we trying to prevent accidental deaths? When we lump them all together in federal legislation, that's a problem. Trying to solve too many things at once when the issue is, as she points out, complicated and nuanced, especially when you put this in the hands of politicians, and especially politicians who have divisive views on guns. So, safe storage is not going to solve the 48,000 gun deaths in the U.S. It won't even come close. But it can help mitigate subsets of the overall total. See, this is where we have to be honest. We have to be honest about whatever we're proposing. We have to be honest about what that proposed solution will actually do. This is why I get very frustrated with politicians who talk about how background checks save lives, when there's absolutely no way to verify or quantify the number of lives saved, or if any are saved at all. So yes, this can help with subsets of the overall total when we're talking about gun violence, gun deaths, gun homicide. Let's say gun deaths. So let's take each of these in turn. Mass shootings. Yes, some shooters do get their guns from parents who improperly store their firearms. I can think of a couple of examples immediately. One of them being the Santa Fe, Texas school shooter who got his guns because his father left them accessible to him. The other would be the Sandy Hook shooter. And I know you're probably going to respond and say, wait a minute, the kid killed his mother and stole her guns. Yes, that's true. But the fact of the matter is that she gave her mentally ill son access to her gun safe. The fact that he killed her is not really relevant. The fact is that she had already given him access to the guns. And if he didn't know how to access the safe, killing her would only have left him with a charge of matricide, not mass murder. And I think didn't we have another shooting this year or last year where the parents gave the kid access to guns despite his homicidal delusions, and even, I think, texting him at school, warning him not to say anything about the guns? So yes, safe gun storage, better decisions as parents can stop mass shootings. Some of them, right? We have to be honest about this. It can stop some of them. What about gang violence? Truth is, gangs get guns through theft and straw purchases. So safe storage might stop a small number of gangbangers from stealing guns from their parents. But since most of their parents are probably in possession of the firearms illegally anyway because they live in cities where gun ownership is restricted, I suspect that number is staggeringly small. So we probably shouldn't even mention gang violence when it comes to trying to this kind of safe storage issue. What about teen suicide and accidents? Now, this is where parental responsibility and safe gun storage can have the greatest impact, in my opinion. It's simply not enough to tell people to be responsible. I mean, have you listened to our episodes about Florida Man? There needs to be something more concrete to back it up. And this is why I have advocated on the show many times, at the very least, civil liability for the parents who leave their guns accessible to people who shouldn't have them. If you can be prosecuted or sued for allowing a dangerous animal to maul a child, you should face, I think, worse consequences when it comes to firearms. After all, your kid can't massacre a school full of students with a Rottweiler, but he can if he gets a hold of your gun. So back to the author. Quote, where do these young people obtain those guns? Often from unsecured locations in the home. Now, again, that's a bit misleading when you say often. Often in what circumstances? In the case of suicide and accidents, yes. In the case of gang violence, no. In the case of mass shooters, sometimes. Back to the author. The trend is discouraging. A Journal of Urban Health survey reports that the number of children living in a home where they are exposed to unsafely stored guns jumped from 1.6 million in 2002 to 4.6 million in 2015. Now, I have no idea how they came to those conclusions. There's no way they interviewed 4.6 million children in 4.6 million households. My guess is that they surveyed a small number of kids and did an extrapolation. But with over 100 million gun owners in America and the rising tide of stupidity and decline in personal responsibility and common sense that we see around us, I think it's safe to say that 4 to 6% of gun owners probably shouldn't own guns. Not that there should be a law forbidding them from owning them, just in principle. That's all I'm saying. People are just stupid sometimes. Again, Florida man. Back to the author. Quote, I'm politically agnostic. I'm a politically agnostic advocate for the adoption of Ethan's Law at the federal level. Meaning, for those of you who don't know the term agnostic, she doesn't really have a political leaning in this. Given the perennial party split on gun issues in the U.S., she says, it's not surprising that most of our support has come from Democrats. But I welcome and even expect support on the issue of safe gun storage from Republicans as well. Now, gun safety should be apolitical. Actual gun safety, not gun control. That is political, absolutely. And the fact that Democrats have used the term, quote unquote, gun safety to rebrand what is actually gun control as a way to hide their true intentions doesn't help the cause of actual gun safety. And it may have actually poisoned the well at this point because gun owners like me, hear somebody say gun safety and immediately think gun control. And you can blame Democrats for that. Back to the author. According to its own website, the National Rifle Association should be banging the table for Ethan's Law. The NRA, after all, is an enthusiastic advocate for responsible gun ownership, urging members to, quote, store guns so that they're not accessible to unauthorized persons, end quote, and recommending gun storage devices. Moreover, with today's biometric/PIN code safes, gun owners can access smartly stored weapons faster than they can open their iPhones. If the NRA's endorsement of responsible gun ownership is sincere, the organization surely must also endorse negative consequences for gun owners who elect to be responsible. Now, you might find it interesting that I don't disagree with that assessment. If you've been a listener for any period of time, you know my thoughts on the failings of the NRA. However, endorsement of negative consequences for irresponsible gun owners does not automatically mean endorsing Ethan's Law. The devil, as we say, is in the details, and we'll be talking about the actual bill shortly. Quote, if my son had been in a home of a responsible gun owner, quote unquote, as defined by the NRA, he would not be dead. If Ethan's Law passed at the national level, or if a similar law passes in your state, many other sons could be saved, and many other mothers could be spared my nightmare of grief. Now, this is a bit speculative. I do like the fact that she is not railing against gun ownership, and she is pointing out the options for gun safety, biometric PIN safes, and those sorts of things. That you can have both. You can have gun rights and be responsible gun ownership or gun storage. But notice, and I think I emphasized it in the way I read it, her use of the term could be saved, could be spared. I do like the fact that she said could be and not will be. Like I said, the gun control crowd uses that latter phrasing, telling you that their gun control ideas are going to say they will save lives, like background checks, like I mentioned. Background checks save lives, which is demonstrably false. One way to scuttle any legislative remedy is to oversell the effects of that remedy. If you're going to try to tell me that this is absolutely going to save children, that it's absolutely going to spare mothers the nightmare of grief, then I'm going to be rather hesitant to believe it. But if you tell me it could, and I believe it could, I'll be more likely to listen to your ideas. Congress, she says, needs to act for child safety by requiring all gun owners with children in their homes to secure their weapons. Until that happens, Ethan will not rest in peace. But when that happens, maybe I can rest too. This is annoying. This is the part that I find terribly annoying. I agree with her that all gun owners with children in their homes should secure their weapons properly. But I hate when she starts to claim that her son will not rest in peace. Claiming that the dead will not rest until laws are passed is stupid. I'm sorry, it just is. I have a great deal of sympathy and support for this woman. I support her goals in principle, but saying this stuff rubs me the wrong way. As Christians, we hope that her son Ethan died in Christ. And if so, he is at peace in heaven, free from the suffering and the stupidity of this life in this world. But to suggest that he is not at peace because politicians have not passed a law is awful, in my opinion. Now, I pray that she can find peace. I pray that somebody could preach the gospel to her so that she may find it. I hope that would happen. But we see this with a lot of parents who channel their grief over children lost in tragedies into activism. And they find their own peace and they think that they will rest when this law gets passed. And you're replacing God with government. If you pin your hopes and your dreams, your comfort in what government does or doesn't do, people who do that probably aren't Christians, or they are in name only. They're misplacing their trust. Don't place your trust and your hope in princes. I understand the motivation to want to make a change, to feel like Ethan's death was not in vain, that something good could come of it. But what I fear for this woman and for many others who do this sort of thing, who immediately pivot to activism as a result of their tragedy, that they're not really processing their grief, and they're channeling all of that energy into meaningless activism. Her goals are good. That's not meaningless. What she wants to achieve is very noble and good. That's not meaningless. But suggesting that simply passing this law is going to put Ethan at peace when he is already in the grave, that it's going to put her or give her peace, that's misguided and unfortunate. And I really hope that someone can preach the gospel to this woman and help her, that the Holy Spirit would help her to find the strength to deal with her grief and to move forward and to approach this in a different mindset. Now, if you are a Reformation Gun Club member, you're going to be able to hear an extended edition, a second part, a part 2 for today's episode, where we're going to actually dig into this resolution, what she is calling Ethan's Law, House Resolution, and I mentioned it earlier, HR 660, and we're going to look at the specifics and discuss them and how they might work or not work and how we might make things better. because as I've said, I'm supportive of this idea that there should be a consequence for your stupidity. One of my favorite YouTube channels is the hockey guy, Shannon Scanes, and he does amazing videos on hockey. And one of his favorite sayings is stupidity should be a 2-minute penalty. In life, there should be consequences for your stupidity. And if you're stupid enough to leave a gun in a shoebox, on top of your nightstand, in a drawer in your nightstand, when you have children in the home, or when you have people in your home that could gain access to your firearm but shouldn't, that's stupid. It's incredibly stupid. And there should be a consequence for that if that stupidity results in someone's injury or death. So we're going to talk about the law, or what's being proposed, H.R. 660 and Senate Bill 173. We'll look and see if there's a difference between the two as well. But I think we'll see, just to give you a bit of a heads up, we'll see that there are good ideas, but like with red flags, there are shortcomings that aren't considered that suggest that passing this may, as usual when it comes to legislation at the federal level, that passing something in its current form without some guardrails will lead to very negative consequences for gun owners. So, for those of you who are gun club members, check out part 2. That will be coming in a separate episode released at the same time, or actually both of these will be available to gun club members early. But there's a second part coming. And for those of you who are not gun club members, I hope you will consider joining. Check out reformationgunclub.com to look at the benefits. And I hope you will sign up today and come check out all the extra content that we have available. And if not, we will talk to you again next week for episode number 379. We're rolling our way towards episode 400. We're just 22 episodes away from episode 400. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but early next. But we'll see if we can't get Pastor Bennett in here with us next week as well to do a little more sleuthing and have a little fun. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.